22% pass rate for the July level 1 exam. After we see 25% for May of level 1, we're down to 22%. So the first part of this video, I'm going to discuss this pass rate, and we'll look at it from a micro level, which is how CFAI is looking at it, and I'll explain that process in a second. Also, I'm going to answer the question, how much time is required? Because I get this question a lot. I'm going to be doing level 1 or level 2 or level 3. How much time do I need to put in? There's no one answer for that. My standard answer is, I don't know. I know nothing of your ability. I can't possibly answer this question. One of the most misleading numbers out there is 300 hours. It's a very misleading number, and I wish that we could just get rid of it. But I'll show you where 300 hours fits in and why it's misleading. It is a conditional expectation. It is not an average amount of time that's put in, so I'll explain that. So let's look at this pass rate from July, 22%. Whenever we try to explain something, and the thing that we're trying to explain here is a pass rate, is we can take two approaches to explain pretty much almost anything. Is you could take a macro approach, and you can say, well, it's something at the level of the exam, perhaps that being the macro approach, or you could take a micro approach and say, well, it's something at the level of the candidate. And the macro and the micro, whenever you have any sociological question, this being a sociological question, is you first define what the micro and the macro are. So if we were talking about the behavior of certain countries, the macro would be the globe, whereas the micro would be the country. There are times where we're more interested with a particular country, where the macro is country variables, the micro might be province or state variables, and you could just go down from there. Here we'll define the macro as the level of the exam. And lacking information on the micro level, which is all of us, we don't have the kind of granular information that CFAI has on the pass rates based on never deferred, once deferred, twice deferred, etc. All we can do is theorize at the macro level. So we have theories in terms of the exam is getting harder, which is why the pass rate happens to be dropping. The minimum passing score happens to be raising. All of these are macro arguments to try to make sense of why these pass rates are dropping. However, CFAI has numbers that probably support a more micro argument, and they've been sticking with this micro argument since the May results were released. For the July results, this is there was a story on Bloomberg, and one quote, when I read it, I thought, well, why would you say that unless you had some really firm basis to believe that? And here's the quote: "The Institute expects pass rates to improve in the future, approaching pre-COVID levels, so long as pandemic conditions subside." So when I read that, I thought, well, on what basis would you say that? Because now you've said that. You expect it to return to normal, so you must believe that that's true. On what basis would you believe that? So I think whenever I have to try to solve something, I think, well, what information would I need to be able to say something like that? And is that information that is available? So they probably have different categories for the level 1 exam where they can look at pass rates. Here is 0 deferrals, here is 1 deferral, 2 deferrals, and 3 deferrals. And they may look at pass rates and say, well, if you were never deferred, we have a 45% pass rate. If you were deferred once, we're seeing of all the people who passed that were deferred once, out of all the people who were deferred once, it's 40%. Then if you were deferred twice, it's 35%. If you deferred 3 times, it's 20%. Maybe they see something that looks like this. And they're saying, well, as the number of deferrals increase, the pass rate drops. It must be something in the deferral process itself. That would be a consistent statement. That would be something I would look at and say, well, yeah, it's something in the deferral process. What exactly it is, I don't know. You'd need some learning theorists and some psychologists to come in and say, well, what does your literature tell us about this sort of thing? But I imagine the weight of having been deferred and having to revisit the same content multiple times has to weigh on you. like a course that's gone on for way too long. You have no more interest in the material. It's becoming harder and harder to bring yourself to even look at it anymore, because every time you do, you just get sick of it, especially if you've been deferred 2 times and 3 times, that I can imagine that would weigh on you. So maybe that's what's going on. To be able to make a statement like, I expect it to return to normal, you must have some basis for saying that. And if I had this kind of information, and if this is what the information was saying, I would say the exact same thing. So the only thing I think CFAI can do to be more transparent is, if they have this information, tell us what this information is. I don't think they will. I think this is stuff that they know inside. There's this shroud of secrecy around the exam. I don't think that's going to be breached at all. I can only say, I don't think that you would make such a statement unless you had a basis for making that statement. I know that you have the ability to generate these numbers, and if you do, you would have, because that's what I would have done. I would have generated numbers like that and said, is there a pattern here? I would have. So I know that they did too. I don't have a monopoly on clear thinking. I'm sure that they did it as well. So I'm going to take them at their word here. Can we look at FRM, CAIA, and ACCA, and can we sort of get a little bit more comfortable with this argument that, yeah, something like this is going on. It does have something to do with the deferral process. I'll start from the bottom and work my way up. I'm not that familiar with ACCA. I looked around to see if I could find any kind of conversation about, people being upset about pass rates changing. I went to their website and I found that their pass rates over a period of time for the last 10 years, no change in the pass rates. Oh, they bounce up here and there for the different, 8 different categories that I saw, but overall, I didn't see a big plunge in the pass rates. I know nothing about the ACCA exam process, so that's about the best that I can offer. For CAIA and FRM, let's have a look at 2 charts that I was able to find. I can't comment too much on CAIA, but FRM holds a big clue for us. All right, here's the CAIA pass rates, and attribution here is important. 300 hours is where this is from. Going back to March 2010 all the way to March 2021, you do have a downward trend in the pass rate. This is consistent with, if you look at the last 20 years, 30 years of CFAI, you have the same downward trend over time. If we concentrate here from before, pre-pandemic, September, let's go to September 2018 to post-pandemic, well, mid-pandemic, it's not post-pandemic yet. Pretty constant at about 54. Yeah, 54, 54, 52, 54, 52, back up to 54. Fairly constant. However, CAIA does offer online proctored exams that if your Pearson VUE Center cannot accommodate you, you can just do it online. So from what I can understand of the process, it's unlikely that there'd be a deferral unless you say, look, I don't want to do it online, I'll just wait. I don't even know if you can, but when I saw that the online proctored exam was an option, I can't read too much into the CAIA pass rates, because it is highly likely that no one need be deferred if I could just write it at home. Let's look at FRM. Now FRM, if you go to GARP's website and you look for exam deferrals, you'll find that a whole bunch of exams were deferred. And a whole bunch of FRM candidates were in fact deferred. So you do have exam deferrals in FRM. Great. Let's see what happens. The lower green line, well, first of all, attribution here, bottom of the screen, created by David Harper, Bionic Turtle. David is a well-known figure in the FRM space, been there for a long time, very familiar with the exam process. So let's again go 2018 to 2021. The bottom dark green is level 1. Well, you know, I don't see that big drop off. The top brown line is level 2. I see normal normal variation in the pass rates, but I don't see that big drop off either. And there were deferrals. So does this mean that the argument doesn't hold any water, that CFAI is just, looking for something to say and not wanting to say, look, we just made the exam harder, but we're not going to just tell you that? Well, no, there is a difference, and this is in conversation with David through LinkedIn Exchange. There is a difference in the grading methodology and the scoring methodology between the two designations. One is competency-based, one is competitive-based. So CFAI is competency-based, and I've explained this process a number of times. A group of experts will get together and look at the exam and say, what would a minimally qualified candidate score on this exam given the level of questions? So it helps to control for the level of difficulty, such that if the exam had nothing but a whole bunch of easy questions, the experts would arrive at saying, look, a minimally qualified candidate should get at least 85%. And if the exam had super, super hard questions, they may say, look, a minimally qualified candidate would get 55%, and that would set the first stage of the minimum passing score. That minimum passing score is then revisited, and if it's way out of line with exam results, it's then modified, which is why it's called a modified Angoff system. And that is competency-based. So what the exam is saying is you must achieve this level of competency to pass, and we're not going to change it. Whereas with FRM, it is competitive-based. So they say, well, we want a certain pass rate, and that's what the pass rate is going to be. And what fluctuates from year to year is the minimum passing score. So Dave informs me that the minimum passing score during the pandemic plunged to just above 50%. In other words, you only had to get a little more than half the questions right to pass. A little more than half to pass. So they were able to maintain the same type of pass rate by dramatically lowering the passing score because the candidates who were deferred performed quite poorly. Aha! Well, that fits with CFAI's argument. CFAI is not going to change the minimum passing score to engineer a pass rate, but FRM did because performance plunged. That is all consistent. So, if CFAI is going to make a statement like we believe it's going to return to pre-COVID levels, they must have some basis for saying that, which means they must have a micro-argument. They must have numbers to back up that micro-argument. We lack the micro information, so we're left with macro theories and saying, look, CFAI is just not being transparent. I wish they would say something. Meanwhile, it could be that the whole time they were saying exactly what the case was. It is those who are deferred and the weight of those deferrals causing poor performance in those particular cohorts, which is causing the low pass rate among the whole group. But if we just extracted those who were never deferred, we see normal pass rates. So we have a firm basis to make a statement like we expect the pass rates to return to normal. When the May results were released, the July cohort did not have the benefit of seeing those numbers. But the August cohort did have the benefit of seeing those numbers, so perhaps for the August exams we may see lower pass rates than historical, but recovered a bit from these low levels because it might have jolted those candidates into action saying, listen, I believe the story that the exam is harder, so let me double my efforts. Let me dig deep and see what I got left. And maybe they just tried harder. For November, we're going into November exams, I do expect deferrals in different countries. So I do expect November to be deferred again. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not they're forced into the 2022 content, or there will be another window opened up in February for 2021 content. That's going to be interesting. I've got no buzz about that at all, but I think that's going to be rather interesting to see. So, listen, At this point, with the evidence from FRM and seeing that their minimum passing score has dropped considerably to maintain the pass rate, from the statement made from CFAI that they expect these things to return to normal, I'm going to go ahead and say I think they are being as transparent as they want to be and as they can be without actually saying, here's the pass rate broken down by deferral. I don't think we're going to see those numbers. So is the exam gotten harder? Probably not. Are the questions harder? Is the minimum passing score being raised? Probably not. The micro argument at this point probably makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's go back to our last screen here. Okay, next one. How much time is required? I do get this quite a bit. And the best way for me to answer this is to sort of draw out a graphic for you. And I've always, when I get this question, I always say, look, I can't answer this for you. It depends on your ability. And on our site, if you're using our study planner, you can mark certain readings as really difficult or really easy for you, and it will adjust the amount of hours that you say that you need. So it will have a certain average of hours. Let's say you want to put in 300 hours. You type in 300. Then you go to that chart and you say, well, no, this is super hard. This is hard. This is hard. You click on all the readings that are hard. That 300 hours will expand. Because for you, it'll be more hours if you want an average 300, because it's an average passing candidate, right? It is the expected amount of time given that a candidate has passed. It's a conditional expectation. It is not the average of all candidates, because whenever we hear the number 300 hours, there's always the rejoinder, yes, but the average candidate fails. The 300 is for those who pass. This is how many hours they report in studying. But it's a flawed number. And averages can be very flawed. Let me give you an example. 10 people in a room. Take the average height of everyone in the room. Let's say it's 5'9". There's a very good possibility you get to the conclusion that nobody in the room is an average height. Meanwhile, the average is 5'9", but nobody is the average height. That's the flaw of averages. What we're more concerned with when we have averages like that is the dispersion and the shape of the distribution. So let's see if we can't get to the shape of the distribution just by using some general logic. And I think the best continuum to use is ability. And listen, we have a distribution of ability. Some of us are very good athletically, some of us aren't. That doesn't mean we can't be, it just means we have to work harder. Some of us are naturally gifted in the arts, in music, in art itself, in drawing. Some of us are not. That doesn't mean we can't get there, it just means we need more time. Same cognitively. Some of us have better cognitive gifts than others. So let's just draw a spectrum where we have low and high ability. And when I say low ability, I'm not talking about in the general population. You're not the general population. You are a step above simply because you've already achieved a certain level of academic accomplishment. You're in university, you're third year, fourth year, or you've graduated, but you are in the upper tail of the population as it is. But even though you're in the upper tail, that upper tail does have its own distribution as well. So you may be in the lower end of the upper end. How's that? And we'll do another a vertical here, and here we'll put time. And here's your 300 hours right here. And let's draw the distribution. And the distribution is not linear. It'll look something like this, where everything above this line is a pass. So we've crossed ability with time, and everything above the line is a pass. We can see clearly it's curved linear. As we drop lower in our ability, we do have to increase the number of hours required to equal a pass of somebody with high ability with fewer hours. So a good example is, let's say, learning how to play piano. Somebody who has a natural talent for that might put in 200 hours to get to a certain level. Whereas to get to that level, because I have no natural talent for that at all, I might have to put in 2,000 hours to get to the same level. Just because I don't have a natural talent doesn't mean I can't get there. It just means I can't get there in the same amount of time. I'm going to have to put in more time. And of course, you have to, trade off saying, look, given how much time I'm going to have to put in for something I'm clearly not good at, is it even worth me doing? And when I started learning piano, it became very obvious very quickly that, the amount of time that I would have to put in to be semi-good, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. I have other things that that I'm better at that I can do in less time. So this is a better way to envision how much time is required. Is the lower your ability, your natural ability is. And look, there are some readings that are purely narrative, and there are some readings that are heavily quantitative. If you're good with numbers or not. For me, numbers was always easy A's. I took in university as many numbers courses as I could because they were just easy A's. I just had a natural ability to see the numbers and to see what was going on. It just made sense to me. So anything with numbers in it, I'd rate as really easy. For me, that's easy. I don't need that much time to get comfortable with it. Maybe you're opposite. Maybe you look at numbers courses and say, I hate the numbers, but the narration, the words, the discussion, the conversation, I love the verbal side of things. I just don't like the quantitative side of things. Well, it's going to take you longer. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means it's going to take you longer. So where you are on here, and I don't know, I can't give you a formula for what this line looks like so that you could just type in, well, my grade point average in university was this and this. The planner we have where you rate your level of difficulty on each reading is the best we have so far. We keep refining it so that, I think we need some that go even higher in the level of perceived difficulty to catch this non-linear effect up here. But if you rate yourself as lower in ability, well, guess what? You're going to need significantly more than 300 hours. If you rate yourself very high on ability, well, you'll need fewer than 300 hours, but not so much fewer. I mean, there'll come a point where you're not going to do it in less time, regardless of what your ability happens to be. So the 300, again, this is how much the average or the average amount of time a candidate who passed the exam reported putting in. There's another problem with this 300 is that it is a skewed number. Typically, if we could, and I don't know that we can, I don't even think CFAI has this information, but if they did have this information on the level of ability, and I imagine they say, well, the level of ability is your score on the test. That's our best estimate of your level of ability. But if they had some measure of what your ability was before you took the test, call it IQ if you want, some kind of IQ measure. I think what we would find is the pass rate for individuals given high ability is significantly higher than the average pass rate, which means that those who are passing the exam, if I had to take one at random and one who failed at random and measured IQ, I think I would find, in samples, if I took repeated samples of that, I think I would find a statistically significant difference between the two. I don't think that's shocking to say, right? I think I would find a statistically significant difference between the two, such that the 300 hours is not an average candidate, but the 300 hours is a candidate of above average ability. If we think that the middle of this continuum from low to high, the middle here is average, the 300 is probably skewed more towards high ability candidates, and they would obviously be reporting a lower number of hours. So that 300 hours I think is very misleading. And I don't think you have a normal distribution here. Clearly, if you have a curved linear effect, you don't have a normal distribution. I think your distribution looks something like this. Draw it out as best I can. I think you have a very skewed distribution, which means when you think about the lower ability and the amount of hours you have to put in terms of the distribution, you are going to be way in the left tail on this one, or you'd have to flip this one around, way in the right tail on this one in terms of the number of hours that you would have to put in. And I think that after a certain point, the number of hours don't justify the reward that you would get. That there are some people who are probably better suited towards doing something else as opposed to putting in this many hours into it. So to answer the question, generally and universally for everyone, how much time is required, only you can answer that. I know nothing about you. I have no history on you at all. I don't know where you get your motivation from, whether it's internally or externally. And well, now that I brought that up, I'll talk about that. I think over here you have a huge amount of internal motivation, and over here I think you have your motivation comes externally. Generally speaking, not deterministically, but generally speaking. So again, I don't know anything about you. I don't know your history. I don't know anything about your ability. I can't possibly answer how much time something is going to take you. All I can do is say, listen, this 300 hours is probably on the low level. It's probably a good number to follow if you are an above average candidate. But if you're not an above average candidate, and listen, you've been through university, you know where you sit in the class averages. You know. I mean, it's not as if it's a shock to you to say, well, look, I'm usually right at the average. I'm a solid C plus B minus student, or I'm a solid B plus student or A student. You know yourself. So you can judge from there where you need to be. Psychologically speaking, that's probably going to be very tough to do because lots of research shows that people who are very high on ability tend to underestimate their ability. And people who are very low on ability tend to think that they're all that in a bottle of wine. They tend to overestimate their ability, and the lower your ability, the smarter you think you are. That is called, if you want to look it up, that is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And over here, this is called the imposter effect. That people who are very, very good at something always think that they're not as good as what they think they are or what they truly are. They tend to underestimate, and they tend to have an imposter syndrome, thinking like any minute now I'm going to be called out. Whereas down here, they have a little bit of information and they feel, no, I know it all. I got this. No need for me to learn anything new. I got this. So you can look up those terms. But that might help you determine the number of hours that you want. Let me talk about internal versus external motivation because this does matter. And depending on where you get your level of motivation, you could be going through the process for two different reasons. Internally motivated is the best place to be because you need nothing to push you to do something. It's a pull that you feel. It could be that you have a level of competitiveness, that you need to be the best. A sense of accomplishment. I want to get this done. You're a high achiever. No matter where you get to, it's never enough. Ego, just to say that you could do it. All of these are internal motivators that make you want to do something. External motivation comes from outside of you. So you may say, I want to get this done to signal to the marketplace that I have a certain level of knowledge, or the promise of higher compensation throughout your career, or the promise of better job prospects. These are all external to you. And you think, if I get this done, these things, I'm working towards these things. You're not being pulled to it, you're sort of being pushed to it. You see this as something that you need to do. Look, I need to do this if I want higher compensation, if I want better job prospects. It's not something that you want to do necessarily. You see it as something that you need to do. And when your motivation comes externally, it's hard to continually push yourself, especially for something that's self-study and especially for something that has only one exam. When you're in university, you can still be externally motivated and still do okay. Your external motivation comes from, if you don't get the assignment done by this time, you're gonna get a terrible grade. If you don't study for this exam on this date, you have all of these deliverables, so that gives you that external motivation to get it done. So if you can find that passion inside you, being internally motivated, is just a better way to approach all of this. And my theorizing or my hypothesizing is that those that tend to do very well, those that are way up here, are probably more internally motivated, and those that are lower on ability, that have to put in more hours, or the ones that tend to fail because they're not putting in enough hours, tend to be externally motivated. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. I hope that adds some insight into your path. Ciao.